The bombing of Coventry, England in November 1940 revealed the brutal hand of German aggression, ripping through vast residential areas and leaving a trail of devastation. The Allies craved vengeance. They aimed to break the German spirit. By November 1941, Britain had set up a covert wartime organization, RE8. It had a straightforward yet frightening mission, engineering an inferno, the likes of which the world had never seen. British engineers, hardened by their own experiences as survivors of the Blitz, sought to craft a far more devastating bombing method to bring Germany to its knees. They scrutinized the construction of German homes, building massive replicas of Hamburg's most densely packed neighborhoods to master the art of spreading a firestorm. The engineers calculated the perfect ratio of high-explosive bombs and incendiaries, concocting a lethal mix of oil-based incendiaries and magnesium bombs. For months, they studied meteorological conditions and wind patterns, knowing high winds would be the best catalyst for the firestorm they intended to unleash. After grueling months of research, by 1943, RE8 had distilled and engineered Armageddon. They would bring forth a catastrophe of biblical proportions on Hamburg. On July 24th, the skies over Germany darkened. Over the following days, more than 3,000 Allied aircraft took to the air, armed with over 9,000 tons of explosives. Their goal, creating an untamable firestorm, a hurricane of destruction whose temperatures would soar past 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than volcanic lava. The wrath of the Allied powers was about to be unleashed in what was aptly named Operation Gomorrah. The terror of Operation Gomorrah was unavoidable. Decades earlier, the devastation of World War I and advances in bombing technology led British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin to grimly predict, quote, "The bomber will always get through. The only defense is offense." He went on to express that they would be forced to take more lives than the enemy, even if they were those of innocent civilians. The Luftwaffe was the first to embrace this ruthless strategy. One of their tacticians asserted, quote, "Terrorizing the enemy's chief cities and industrial regions through bombing would lead much more quickly to a collapse of morale." As war erupted, the Luftwaffe unleashed city-flattening raids on Britain, specifically the Blitz against London and the devastating firebombing of Coventry. Unknowingly, they were also schooling the Allies on what to do and how to perfect the art of carpet-bombing a nation into submission. One victim of the Blitz was Arthur Harris, who would rise to Commander-in-Chief of RAF Bomber Command in February 1942. Harris had endured the fear, chaos, and moral devastation that bombing population centers inflicted. He believed that if Britain hadn't prevailed in the Battle of Britain, the United Kingdom would have surrendered to Germany. Now he aimed to channel that chaos and dread into a potent strategy to force Germany into a swift surrender. Harris believed incendiary bombs, rather than just explosives, could best demolish a city. This required a massive bomber force. Previous operations revealed that daytime bombing led to heavy losses from fighter planes and anti-aircraft guns. Cloud cover also hampered accurate bombing. Nighttime bombing became necessary since bombers were harder to detect, but it also made bombing even more inaccurate. Targeting strategic sites like armament factories or U-boat bases proved futile with the technology of the time. However, shifting from precision bombing to area bombing removed one obstacle: nighttime raids. It was a bold, shrewd plan with the potential to crush Germany. The only problem was that it would be a humanitarian catastrophe. Public perceptions were changing. The days when President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain both condemned the bombing of civilians as contrary to international law and morally indefensible were fading. A significant shift occurred following the Luftwaffe's bombing of Rotterdam on May 14, 1940, which claimed the lives of over 800 civilians. This event spurred the British War Cabinet to authorize retaliatory bombings against Germany. Early British raids focused on industrial and military targets, but these efforts often yielded limited strategic impact due to the inaccuracy of bombing technology. The Butt Report of 1941 highlighted that only about 20% of bombs fell within 5 miles of their targets, leading to reconsiderations of bombing strategies. The sustained bombing of British cities during the Blitz further hardened public and military attitudes. The Blitz took approximately 41,000 civilians and caused widespread destruction, fostering a resolve among the British population to hit back harder. The strategic aim shifted towards undermining German morale and crippling their war industry through more indiscriminate bombing tactics. The war's brutal realities necessitated harsher measures. The argument for total war where any means to hasten victory were justified, gained traction. Despite ethical concerns, the bombing campaign was seen as crucial in weakening Germany's capacity to wage war and shortening the conflict. In February 1942, Arthur Harris, who would soon be nicknamed Bomber Harris, took the reins of Bomber Command. He embraced the shifting opinions and the acceptance of a total war approach in order to end the conflict. He also embraced the switch for practical reasons. He had attempted to use his new Lancaster aircraft for low-level daylight bombing. The RAF lost a great deal of bombers for very little return, and the outcome was terrible. Tactically speaking, Harris believed that the British experience demonstrated that flying at night and carpet bombing large metropolitan areas was the only way to get results. Fortunately for Harris, a team of the Secretive Research and Experiment Unit, or RE-8, had been working for over a year on crafting the most devastating carpet bombing method ever conceived, a bombing raid that would trigger an unstoppable firestorm. British researchers conducted numerous experiments to determine the most effective combination of explosives and incendiaries. They constructed detailed models of German houses and urban areas to replicate typical construction materials and layouts. These models allowed them to test various bomb loads under controlled conditions, evaluating how different combinations of high explosives and incendiaries would interact with German building materials and infrastructure. The ideal mix was found to include both heavy bombs to destroy roofs and create openings, and incendiary bombs to ignite fires within the buildings. The British employed magnesium bombs and oil-based incendiaries as the main mechanisms for the firestorm, while planning to continue raining explosive payloads to obliterate any firefighting attempts by the German population. The weather played a pivotal role in the planning of Operation Gomorrah. The British meticulously studied weather patterns to choose a period of hot, dry weather that would facilitate the rapid spread of fires. They also considered wind conditions, aiming to use prevailing winds to their advantage to fan the flames and spread the firestorm more effectively across the city. The timing of the raids was carefully chosen to coincide with favorable weather conditions that would maximize the destructive impact. The combination of scientific experimentation, detailed modeling, and careful consideration of weather conditions ensured that Operation Gomorrah would be one of the most devastating bombing campaigns of World War II, demonstrating the potential of strategic aerial bombardment. In 1943, Hamburg, Germany was a bustling hub of manufacturing plants and transportation centers, home to the Blumenvoss shipyards, which turned out the U-boats threatening Britain's very existence. Harris pinpointed this northern German city as a prime target. Determined to topple its industrial might, Harris orchestrated a relentless 10-day campaign, codenaming it Operation Gomorrah, a nod to the biblical rain of ruin and fire from above. Initially set for July 22nd, the raid was postponed due to cloud cover. By the 24th, the skies had cleared, setting the stage for an unprecedented assault. That evening, at approximately 10 p.m., 791 British bombers roared into the night. The air fleet, composed of Lancaster, Stirling, Wellington, and Halifax bombers, flew in 6 waves, each with 100 to 120 aircraft, aiming to unleash maximum destruction. Despite the Germans' robust air defense network, Luftwaffe radars were rendered useless that night. The RAF deployed window, small strips of tinfoil, to confound radar returns, blinding interception controllers. Pathfinder aircraft spearheaded the assault, marking routes and aim points with bright red, yellow, and green flares. These flares, burning vividly in the night sky, were dubbed Tannenbaum, Christmas trees, by the Germans below. One eyewitness recalled, quote, "I stood there looking out at the wonderful sky, prettier, much prettier than a fireworks display." But the beauty was fleeting. The Pathfinder's vibrant markers were soon followed by waves of bombers, transforming the night into a hellish inferno. In the period between 1 and 2 a.m., 2,300 tons of bombs rained down on Hamburg, setting a new world record for aerial bombardment. This included 8,000-pound blockbusters and 4,000-pound cookies, alongside over 350,000 individual incendiary bombs. These incendiaries ignited the true inferno. Eyewitnesses recalled hours filled with relentless explosions. Time seemed to stand still as terrified citizens crammed into shelters, shaking with the concrete walls around them. With no lights, water, or food, those who found safety could only wait in despair. Most of the destruction stemmed not from the initial blasts, but from the subsequent fires. This was by design. Incendiary bombs ignited blazes, while strategically placed high explosives and delayed action fuses hindered firefighting efforts. As RAF bombers cleared the area and returned home, it was revealed that this first raid had cost them only 12 planes. As dawn broke, survivors emerged from shelters to find thick black smoke hanging over the city, with fires that would burn for days. Even by late morning, the sun was barely visible through the dense smoke. The physical devastation was overwhelming, leaving no part of central Hamburg untouched. Beyond the ruins, the psychological and emotional toll was staggering. Shocked and disoriented, the survivors grappled with the violence and destruction unleashed upon their city. This first raid left the inhabitants of Hamburg dazed, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the night's horrors. The bombing of Hamburg marked the beginning of a relentless series of Allied raids during World War II. Following the initial British onslaught, 123 American B-17 bombers arrived in the afternoon, targeting the city's shipyards and an aircraft engine factory. The U.S. Army Air Forces employed strategy of daylight precision bombing, aiming to minimize civilian casualties by focusing on military and strategic targets. Utilizing the Norden Mark 15 bomb site, they hoped to mitigate the moral implications of mass destruction. However, flying without fighter escorts and clearly visible to German radar and day fighters, the bombers were exposed and vulnerable. Despite the dangers, the air bomb groups pressed on, facing heavy flak and thick smoke from earlier bombings that obscured their targets. Although they managed to hit some alternative targets, only 60% of their bombs landed near their intended marks. The mission took a significant toll. 15 out of the 109 bombers did not return, a 12% loss rate, highlighting the perilous nature of the 8th Air Force's operations in 1943. The following day, another raid saw 121 B-17s dispatched, but due to navigation and formation issues, only 54 reached Hamburg. With many German fighters diverted to another raid near Hanover, the bombers encountered reduced aerial opposition but still faced persistent flak. Despite these challenges, they dropped 126 tons of incendiaries accurately, adhering to the precision bombing doctrine. On their return journey, Luftwaffe fighters reappeared, but only 2 bombers were lost. The raid underscored the constant peril of such operations, even when initial opposition seemed light. The harshest attack on Hamburg erupted on July 27th. Bomber Command unleashed 787 aircraft, with Pathfinders igniting the targets just after midnight. By 1 a.m., 722 bombers began a relentless 45-minute onslaught, dropping 1,174 tons of incendiaries. The city exploded into an immense firestorm, with temperatures surging past 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The inferno generated hurricane-force winds, ripping trees from the ground and flinging people like ragdolls through the chaos. Streets turned into rivers of fire, consuming everything in their path. Buildings groaned and collapsed under the heat. The sky turned an ominous red, the air filled with the acrid stench of burning wood, fabric, and flesh. Witnesses described the scene as pure hell, the firestorm's devastating roar drowning out the screams and sirens. The heat was so intense it liquefied glass and metal, leaving buildings as hollow shells and turning bricks into dust. For over 4 hours, the flames raged uncontrollably, reducing the cityscape to smoldering ruins. The devastation in Hamburg continued unabated on July 29th and 30th, when 777 RAF planes launched another blistering raid. Despite facing strong Luftwaffe defenses, the bombers ignited yet another firestorm, this time in northern Hamburg, resulting in approximately 1,000 casualties and widespread suburban destruction. Many residents had already fled the city, but those who remained faced dire consequences. A final raid on August 2nd was less effective due to bad weather, forcing bombers to scatter across northern Germany and sparing Hamburg from further severe damage. However, the cumulative effect of these relentless raids left no area of the city unscathed. Despite the intense bombardments and devastation, the Hamburg Philharmonic Orchestra continued to perform. In an incredible display of resiliency and defiance, even in the midst of a literal hell, the orchestra performed concerts in an underground bunker to provide some cultural solace amid the chaos. Karl Bohm was the conductor. The series of firestorms claimed around 40,000 lives, many suffocating from smoke inhalation or carbon monoxide poisoning as the flames devoured all available oxygen. Around 180,000 people were wounded, and over 1 million residents were displaced due to the extensive destruction of homes and infrastructure. Operation Gamora's intensity had a profound impact on German officials. Minister of Armaments Albert Speer noted that the ferocity of the bombing instilled a deep fear, predicting that continued attacks of this nature could halt German armament production within 6 months. Despite the devastation, Hamburg's industrial recovery was nothing short of remarkable, reaching 80% of pre-bombing production within 5 months. Although Hamburg did not face such concentrated bombing again, other German cities would soon suffer similar fates, as the Allied combined bomber offensive continued to target urban centers throughout the war. The horrific scenes in Hamburg foreshadowed the widespread destruction that would befall many German cities, emphasizing the relentless and destructive power of the Allied bombing campaigns. The heavy bombardment served as a clear reminder of the war's terrible effects on the environment and the people who experienced it, as well as the Allies' desire to destroy Germany's industrial capacity and will to fight.